On today's episode, we are delighted to welcome former footballer and blind football coach Tony Larkin OBE. During his career, Tony has been a very influential figure in blind football in Great Britain, and we'll be exploring his personal journey from his early days as a player to his transition into coaching and gaining insights into blind football. Tony and I have known each other for a long time, so it's with a particularly warm welcome I say welcome, Tony.
Oh, thanks very much for inviting me. Really looking forward to this because obviously I had a really long affiliation with British Blind Sport and yourself.
We're really looking forward to seeing you. You and I haven't actually had to catch up for a while, so I'm interested to hear a lot about what you're up to now as well. So that's really good. So, Tony, you've had quite the footballing career. Just to start off with, tell us a little bit about your background and how you initially got into the sport and what's some of the highlights of your playing days.
Yeah, well, I started off playing for Wrexham as a young pro. I played for Wrexham, Shrewsbury, Carlisle and Hereford. And I mainly played most of my football in what they call the old second division. So it would be one down from the Premiership now. I was lucky to have a career of 15 years. And in that period of time, I did my coaching badges. I did qualifications while I was in football, because with going into football at an early age, it did have an impact on my education. That's one of the reasons alongside it I realised football can't go on forever. And I first got involved with blind football when I first joined Shrewsbury in 1978. And we had a lot of students that came from the blind college, and the college were based in Shrewsbury, but we're in the process of moving over to Hereford because they had a campus for girls and a campus for boys, and it was quite a way. There was no joined up, so some of the players came to watch the games. I went and did a bit of a talk to the lads at that stage about football in general. I put that one side, and then I moved to Carlisle, and eventually then I moved to Hereford. And when I got to Hereford, obviously the blind college were there. Same thing was happening. We had the lads coming to watch the game, and some of the girls did as well. And it was then when I was coming towards the end of my career, I realised that I had to look beyond football. My first full-time job was in 1988, where I was made sport and leisure coordinator at the college. And in that idea it was actually getting all our students involved as much as possible in sport and leisure. And straight away, that's where I first got my connection with British Blind Sport, in the sense that the college were a member. I'm affiliated to BBS, and it really helped my role in the sense that, there was a setup of BBS were already running team sports like partially sighted football, not blind football at the time, cricket, goalball, 10-pin bowling, and then individual sports I also did was athletics, swimming, judo, golf and chess. We were able to take students and give them the opportunity for tasting these different sports. But the good thing that also BBS did, there was actually VI organisations that were affiliated and taking part in BBS events right throughout the country. So we had Metro Sports, London Sports, White Rose that covered Yorkshire, Northern Sports that covered all Lancashire area, Avon Sports, South Shields, Birmingham Sports. So that was good for me in the sense that when a student who was interested in the activities, through my connection and being on the committee, then meeting all these individuals at different events, we were able to say when a student left to go to Northern Sports, back to the Northwest, we've tied them up with Northern Sports, and the same with Birmingham or South Shields. So that was a really thing that was important that BBS did. And then the other work that we did with BBS is that they had the contacts with the colleges, and the main two colleges were ourselves and Queen Alexandra College, but we also had links with the schools, because BBS at that early stage realised that it's not just about getting people in at the age of 16, it's about identifying, getting the young people. So
early intervention, definitely.
We did some work then about working with St Vincent's, Priestley Smith, Exall Grange, and there was a stage then that we worked in a joint partnership to say, right, well, I'm going to that school, can I promote the college? At the same time, can we promote BBS to show them as a pathway? Because the first thing parents ask you is, well, where can I, in this area, where can I do activities? So that was my first involvement. And then that really expanded, because in 1995, IPSA got involved with BBS, who were all actively involved in doing goalball at international level, judo, athletics and swimming. And then the other countries were interested in getting blind and partially sighted football involved. I was asked by BBS in a volunteer capacity to do some work to develop blind football and partially sighted football at international level. It was quite interesting because at those days when we were playing the partially sighted football in England, it was five-a-side football, but right throughout Europe, they were all playing futsal, and we didn't have a clue what futsal was then. And again, with blind football, we were playing, we'd started getting a league then with BBS, and we were playing different rules than them. We went to our first competition under the umbrella of Great Britain on the BBS with the men's blind football to Madrid, which was a massive learning curve. And then with the partially sighted one, a month later, I went to Rome, and that was the experience. And then within that year, we went to different countries to play. We went to France, Greece, Italy, both with the blind and partially sighted. I then was asked by BBS and IPSA to go and form a subcommittee. And that's where we formed a subcommittee in 1996, and where we adapted the rules for both, mainly for the blind football, etc. And then from 1996 right the way up through to 99, it was myself, BBS, trying to do the fundraising, raising awareness of getting blind people and partially sighted players to have. First of all, we thought about what's no good going straight to international. Where's the pathway? So the pathway is getting them interested as a hobby, then maybe playing at club level, and then going into international level. So that took a great deal of work on behalf of BBS and myself, etc. And in 1997, we had the first European Championships, which was in Barcelona. And that was interesting because I was having to do the blind and the partially sighted at the same competition. And we came third in both of those competitions, which is amazing, really, considering we were such a young sport. And then in 99, we went then to Belarus for the European Championship for the partial sighted. We finished third in that one. And in 2001, this is where the FA got involved. We went to France with the partially sighted, finished third. And that stage, you know, BBS was still working very closely with the FA. The FA had the money through. It all came about in 99, where the English Federation, the one-to-one ability counts, and the FA put money into it, and that's where they worked and supported the blind football.
Just thinking from a listener's point of view, there's just a couple of things. People wouldn't know what IPSA is, and IPSA is the International Sports Federation for Blind Sport. But also, from because I'm learning today, it sounds that you were very instrumental in GB for the rules around all of this. Are they the rules that have then gone on for the international game?
Well, our first thing was when we first formed the committee with IPSA, and they were the pathway to the Paralympics, etc. in those days, and the European and World Championships. But the rules, we had to really sit down and work the rules, because blind football was very, very strong in South America. It was only just starting in Europe, and you know, so we adapted the rules. So on the committee, there was Carlos Campos. He was the Spain head coach. I was the vice chairman. We had representatives from Brazil, Argentina, France, and Italy, and that committee grew. But that was the first thing about adapting the rules, and we had to do tweaks and more along. But the first thing then, after 1997, we then went to the World Championships in 98 in Brazil. And that was massive in the sense how big blind football was out there. And that's when we first started about, you know, getting to make blind football more attractive alongside the other sport, is to try and get it into a Paralympic sport. And then we worked that we had a subgroup of myself, Carlos, two head coach in Brazil and Argentina, about what we had to do. And the first thing was we had to get African nations or Asian nations involved. So we went out and did some short courses for coaches out there. And then eventually we did get into the Paralympics in 2004. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to go because we had the problem of we were under the FA. We had Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and we were prevented from going. And then France took our place. On the back of that, France's team became full-time, got funding. And then eventually we got into it in 2008, Beijing, and we went to London 2012. So it's been a massive journey.
A huge journey. And actually, just listening to that, and again, for the listeners' sort of benefit, really, the IPC, and I know this for all sports, will only consider having a sport if there is a world appetite, for want of a better
Yeah,
word. So I wasn't aware until you've just told me that by going out to Africa, to Asia, to actually just doing those coaches courses, by developing those continents, then the IPC is going to say, yeah, there's more of a shared worldview on this particular sport. You really have been sort of like at the forefront of getting blind football into the Paralympic Games then.
yeah, and again, you know, I'm grateful to the college really giving me the time to do it, and
Mm.
also BBS in the sense that we didn't have the money then, and it was about fundraising to send.
Yeah,
And it was funny, I went to South Korea because we thought they got in touch, said we've got a blind football, we've got coaches involved, and I
yeah,
went there for 4 days. But BBS helped to fundraise for me to go on the flights, etc. So that's where the partnership was. And we went out there, and then suddenly they had a team. Then China came to that event, and that's where it all started. What we decided to do, Carlos Campos, who was full time with the Spanish
yeah,
Federation, he took care of the South American countries, get more involved. We had Toussaint from France, so he went to the French speaking African nations. I did some work with the English speaking nations, and it quickly, suddenly, it all took off really between 1999 and 2004, that we had the South American Championships, we had an Asian Championships, we had an African Championships, and the European Championships, and it's involved. And that's how quickly how it all took off. And by the importance of being a Paralympic sport, and you know this, Alaina, doing this all this, it really profiles. You get the media interest, and it was a learning curve for us to go to Beijing. And the biggest PR for us was London 2012, which really put disability
disability
football
sport on the
on the
map.
map, because it made
Yeah,
the way it was done. It was everything. The one event happened straight after with the Olympics going on Paralympics. But the big thing that was a big change for us is when we had the parade, we were on the same
yeah,
platform as the lionesses. That for me, you talk about special occasions. That for me, the Paralympics was brilliant in London 2012, but the parade was more important because people came out in the thousands going along and people waving. For me, that was the day where, you know, they're not just waving at the disability, but all together. They didn't look at the disability, they looked at
mm,
everyone as equal as athletes. And that was a
yeah,
special day that day. It's made it with the Lionesses going on the journey. We were on that journey. And on the back of London 2012, the team went full time, which was a
yeah,
great thing. That gave that another opportunity to lift the profile of blind football.
yeah.
Um, you know,
And talking about blind football, what are the main differences, if you're happy to explain it for people that don't know about it? What is the main difference between blind football and mainstream football?
obviously we play on a pitch that's smaller, futsal pitch, which is normally 40 to 42 meters in length, 20 to 22 meters in width. We've got boards in there, and people think the boards are there to stop the ball going off. It's not. That helps with the orientation. And the difference with blind football is communication is so important, because obviously in blind football it's a B1 category. B1 is those people are blind who only got light perception, whereas the partially sighted, which is now known as B2, B3, they're with certain vision. It's about developing those listening skills, communication skills. Orientation and mobility is massive. But for me, what sport does, because one of my roles at the college, I became a teaching mobility, is that sport helps with movement, sport
Mm,
helps confidence, sport helps build up friendships. For anyone getting into sport, it helps with their independence, their mobility and move. That's
mm,
the big thing. And then the big thing is the sound of the ball. Where you can
yeah,
see the ball, it's the sound of it. It's amazing because on between 2010 and 2012, because 2010 we had the World Championships at RNC, and 2012 the publicity we got working with Channel 4, the documentary where they had Danny Mills and certain players coming and trying things under the black shades. The publicity we got leading up to London 2012 was unbelievable, really.
it's bridging that gap, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's bridging the gap between public's perception and the reality that blind sport, in this case blind football, can be really exciting, really
Yeah.
accessible, really something you can get behind. So hearing that people are coming and trying it out, seeing what it feels like, that's really good. Just going back to what you said about sport, people often ask me why I'm in sport, but you hit the nail on the head. To me, sport is the springboard. It helps with movement, it helps with confidence, it helps with socialization, it helps with making friends. It helps with spatial awareness, which is really
Yeah.
important for people with sight loss. Sport can be this tool for so much more. On that, throughout your career in blind football, what has been your highlight or your highlights?
Well, I think that the first one is obviously starting off, and then when we went to Beijing, that was like, oh my goodness, we're here now. And it was a bit of a shock, really. We've been in
Yeah.
competitions where it was just the blind footballers. You go to Beijing, and we went to the holding camp with all the Great Britain teams in Macau. Then we went into the village, and God, there was every disability there. It was massive. And when we played our first game, it was like, oh my goodness, it was a massive occasion. And to be honest, because we weren't used to that, we didn't perform as well. I can always
Yeah.
remember our first game, funny enough, was against China. And I'm looking down the line at the players, and I thought, even the staff, and all, they were really shaking because this was the first time they played in front of quite a big
Quite
capacity.
an audience.
That was brilliant. I went to 8 European Championships. 5 of those became second, went to 5 World Championships. Our highest position was fourth in Hereford. We went to Grand Prix, and then I had my time with 3 European Championships, the partials. But I think getting to 2010 was special because obviously it was held at the college. It helped with the vision we had about building a pitch, improving the college, and it all happened there, that was the building to London 2012. But London 2012 was special in the sense that we were on BBS, were very much actively involved in it on the committee and getting everything right. And I can always remember going to things saying like, this is the stadium you're going to be held at. And originally it was going to have a capacity of 1,500. I realised when they put the ticket sale up, that's not going to be enough. And we had capacity of 3,500, and it's sold out,
Yeah,
which
it did
it
sell
wasn't
out.
like in Beijing. And that was an unbelievable. But it was just, that for me was everything around that was a legacy in the sense that, as I said, we've already touched on it, the parade, everything was
Yeah.
done right. It wasn't just blind football, it took all the other disabilities to
Yeah.
another level.
The other thing is you've just talked about the games, and I think you don't give yourself enough credit for the things that you've done. I know you've talked on the bigger scale, the influence that you've had to get it into the Paris and stuff, but you've always had the athlete at the heart of what you do. And I
Yeah,
remember Roy Turnham saying to me one day, and again, for those that don't know, Roy has been playing for the international elite team. Roy said to me, one of the things that Tony did when we first would go into a session of a new venue, even if it was training, is Tony would walk us around and tell us what it looked like, where
yeah,
the space was. He didn't just expect us to turn up, rack onto the pitch, but actually wanted to orienteer us. He said, and that has helped us all massively. So I think that is pretty standard practice now for
yeah.
most coaches, but I think you were the guy that did it first.
Yeah, it's obviously because once you're right in that one, and I think it's what I learned at the college, bit of mobility training when you teach it,
Mm,
etc. It's just doing things step by step. It happened in a sense that through the UEFA soccer project, this is where we got money after Beijing to go to other countries. So IPSA paid for that, and we put a course together, and then I put 2 or 3 courses together with the FA. Even
yeah,
now, I'm still working on identifying new coaches, but that's really, really important about the orientation. It's like anything else. When I play football, you go to a new ground, you take an environment, what studs you're going to wear. And we even do it now because we talk about Roy seeing quite a lot at the camp now. We've got Dave Clark back involved. He's supporting the men's team, but he's done a few talks to the girls about the sacrifices you had to do with becoming a top athlete. They all always say about the orientation going to games and
yeah,
finding about, because each board and sound and each environment's totally different. It's something when you're talking, you forget about it really,
yeah.
because we're
But I
natural.
think given your role at the college as well and being a football coach, I think you were able to bring all of that together, the knowledge from both, in order to help modern day coaches, people are going to become coaches in the future, that you've had such an influence on that training element. And I think we're all grateful for that.
It was because I remember going back to my first interview. I got interviewed and they wanted someone fairly quickly in a part-time basis. So I got
Yeah.
interviewed on the Thursday morning. This wouldn't happen now. And I started on the Thursday night, 8 blind footballers, and I'm thinking, what the hell do I do here? When I just watched them and I did things and I could see, and that straight away I thought, don't worry about it, because these 8 guys all
Yeah.
love football and they got the same enjoyment as I did as a sighted person. They helped me to pick up the skills and I practiced myself on the shades. And it was a massive learning curve for me, really.
You're right. I really like hearing that it was a real learning curve for you. It wasn't just for them, it was for you as well.
It's still learning now because
Mm.
taking over the women's football, because there's not enough blind female athletes at the moment, you're allowed to have a B2, B3. Now, that comes with a problem. Blind and air orientation, mobility is great, but putting someone under the shades and ask them
Yeah.
to move around. So we've got to spend more time with the ones who are partially sighted to work them under the shade. So a lot of practice and orientation and movement skills. I always look at an example when you teach a person who's blind, they're good at going forwards, but if you ask them to move forwards, backwards, and sideways, which you have to do a lot in team sport, that's the
Yeah.
type of thing. That for me, when I came back working with the girls, they're all at different levels and still are now when we've got new players in. So, as you just said, you never stop learning, really.
No, you don't. And talking about that, some of the listeners won't be aware, but you did actually step away from coaching for a while. But now that you've returned, and I think, did you say it's been 3 years? You're actually coaching the women's blind
Yeah,
football team.
what happened was they had a restructure in the FA. Colin Chaters, who you know from the English Federation,
Yeah.
Colin said, and James Watkins got in touch, said, look, we need an independent person to do the interviews for the men's coaches and the female coaches. Would you be involved? On the panel was James, Catherine Gilby. So we did all the interviews for the men on Zoom, and that was interesting. And then we did all the ones for the women, and then at that stage, I'd been involved in doing some commentary, which we'll talk about a bit later, for the the Disability Cup. And it was my wife who pushed me because she'd never been to St George's. Went to St George's. I saw ex-people you were into, like George Ferguson, Steve Daly, Robin Williams, and all that. And she said, "Oh God, they think so much of you." And then it was after doing the interviews, and Michelle Willicott was successful in getting the women's job, but she had no experience. And they said, would you work with her as a coach in a mentor role? And that's what we did leading up to the World Championships in Birmingham 2023. That Michelle was the head coach. I was working as a mentor role. Unfortunately, again, for Michelle, she had worked with CP United, self-employed. For her to give that time, she didn't do it, so she stepped away. And then after that, I've been the head coach, and I'm developing other coaches to step in. Where I thought I'd finished, I'm sort of starting on the journey, really.
Women's football generally has grown exponentially in the last few years. What's your thoughts on the development of women's blind football in GB?
Well, the interest is there. We haven't got the numbers at the moment compared to, same again, Argentina's got a successful women's blind football team. They've got blind and partially sighted players playing. They've already got a league. We haven't got a league going. Brazil have now got a team. What's happened is through the interest of the Paralympics and the Lionesses, women's football profiling being risen. Where we first started in '95, the countries there. So, for example, now I've just done. We had to do a task for. I'm on the committee now for IPSA Women's Football Subcommittee, and there's 12 in that short space of time. There's 12 European countries have got a women's blind football. You've got African nations. So we had Morocco. You've got Nigeria. There's Cameroon. There's 5 or 6 African nations there. You've got obviously South America now with Argentina. Brazil are involved now. Some of the other South American teams are doing football. You've got India playing football. Australia got a women's blind football team.
It's
The
growing.
interest is there. We've now got to put a strategy to say, because to become a Paralympic sport, it's not just about the now. It's what you're going to do if you do get in the Paralympics and the years after. And the
Yeah.
strategy's got to put together. So that's what's being done well with the men. So that's the process we're in at the moment. So there's a massive interest. I know the girls who play for me, they really got the bug of playing blind
Yeah,
football.
maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it'd be really lovely to see how women's blind football is, because back in 1995, we wouldn't know where
Yeah,
men's blind football was at this point. Just going on to your commentating, I have to say, as the hosts of the IBSA World Games 2023 in Birmingham, and it was the first time the Games was ever held in GB, what was that experience like, just hosting it in the UK and being a part of it?
it was a colleague of mine who did the main commentary, was Phil Dean, who's sadly passed away. The commentary was not just commentating the game, it was people who knew about it, were saying,
Yeah.
well, this happened, etc. And again, I think the feedback from that, and you most probably know better, was that people watching got to learn the game quicker
Mm.
than when they've watched it
Mm.
before. So again, that was just something really, really new. And to think about what's happening now, that you're getting football covered on YouTube, but for the Disability Cup to be covered, and that's not just doing blind, it's the party sighted, is a massive stepping stone.
The only way we can break down barriers is to be able to be more front facing for the world to see.
It's going back, and I think what needs to be done compared to the countries, we've had this the same with the men in Brazil, Argentina. They get youngsters who are visually impaired from a very young age.
Yeah.
And I think, I know BBS are doing this because you're working with the schools, and it's even more difficult now because there's less specialist schools. They're going into
Yeah, that's
mainstream
right.
education. Sometimes there's less opportunity to do that activities, and that's what I know you're doing that with the Have a Go things, working with schools. I'd say this to the FA, we're finding athletes at the age of 16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
Why aren't we finding them at 12 or 13, 14? And then when you find them, how are you going to support them? Because that's the next step,
Mm.
the challenge for everybody,
Mm.
really.
I think as well, Tony, British Blind Sport do work with schools and stuff, but we have programs like First Steps and See My Voice, which is really about pushing early intervention. Our programs start at the age of 5 now,
Yeah.
and that's really just to show parents, carers, and teachers. Then, if that child then goes on and loves sport and wants to get involved, we've given them a stepping stone. I must say, Tony, you've talked about all these wonderful places that you've been, and you've mentioned a few people within blind sport that, big names, big hitters, Dave Clark, Roy Turnham, and stuff. But you've also met some big hitters in the world of sport. When you and I met many, many years ago, one of the things you told me was a story about David Beckham. I think for the listeners, I'm giggling. If you don't mind telling the story, I think it'd be a nice one to share. I've kind of dropped you in it there, Tony.
I always do laugh at it, and everyone else does. We had the thing prior to London 2012. Sainsbury's were involved, and we did an event at Trafalgar Square, and they eventually got in touch and said, look, we want you to come out to do a session with a very important player. At that stage, we had to keep it quiet. It was David Beckham. At that stage, David Beckham was talking about him being captain of the GB,
Wow.
but thing. Dave
Squad.
Clark, captain for us, they had a similar history, etc. Anyway, that happened. We went out to LA. We spent the day with him. We did the shot of everything. It was on the Jonathan Ross show. It was on all the cinemas around the world. And then when I came back, and David Beckham was a great guy, a friend of mine who was a journalist, we did all this, like you're asking me, describe what was all happening. He said,
Yeah.
was David Beckham like? And I said, well, and I couldn't believe it. I just, thought, well, I said, well, one, he's a really nice bloke. He's good looking and he smells nice. And then Jesus, I then that got put out. Then my ex-friends who were footballers, the amount of stick I got off them, that stuck with me for a long time, really.
I just remember you saying that it was a story that was out there that Tony Larkin said David Beckham smells nice.
Yeah, he did though. I've got to say that.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah, but why I said that, I don't know. I think when you finish an interview and then you're off guard, it's meant to be unofficial. And then I really thought, well, maybe shouldn't have said that, but it just came out, so never mind.
I'm sure you didn't think that was going to go in print, but never mind. We're coming up to our 50th anniversary. We are very excited. What do you see as the future for disability sport? And do you have any message for anybody who's blind and partially sighted who was thinking about getting into sport?
Well, I just think BBS started in 1975. and it's still going, and it's still playing a really important part of a lot of things you're doing. I just think sports being shown, we've still got to push those partially sighted players and the blind players, because sport plays such an important part in, as we said, the independence, the spatial awareness. It gives them confidence by going into a particular team sport and individual. They've got friends for life. But it also, if I look, mention one, for me, I've known Dave Clark from an early age, met his parents, and Dave's parents treated Dave no different from his sister. Dave's sister learned to go on a bike, she fell off it, so did Dave. They really pushed Dave. And if you actually speak to him, Dave, his career, and he's done really well to where he is now with the BPA. He's used sport as a way of helping him. It's gained his confidence, being in a team environment. And he'll say to you, it's helped him get jobs as well, because if you're
Yeah.
a team player and things like that, that's how important. I think as a country, we've got to make sure that we don't leave behind disabled people, because they have the same desires
Mm.
and they can do things. For me, don't say to me, you can't do that. With adaptation, you
Mm.
can. And that's the big thing about it. And I'm sure with yourself and BBS going forward, that particularly blind and vision impaired football has got a great opportunity. Things will
Yeah.
only get better. But it's people like you. If BBS go quiet and don't push things, there's no one there to push you. And if you go back to it, I would still imagine you are. The BBS were the ones who had got the contacts with the schools, the
Yeah.
colleges, the organisation. It's when you look back, you can see that the difference you've made to people. And I just hope that other people who come along and see that difference and think, well, I want to continue that journey to
Yeah.
help vision impaired people.
I have to say, if anyone's made a real difference to people with sight loss, particularly in football, then I don't think there's anyone who has got more impact or had more impact than yourself. Tony, thank you so much for your time today.